We begin this morning with claims that Nigeria's president has lost the moral right to tell citizens what to do. The comments come from the leader of the Pan-Niger Delta Forum, Edwin Clark, who criticized the presidency for failing to condemn the threat issued by a Fulani jihadist group to attack the Delta state if the ban on open grazing isn't reversed in 72 hours. Clark says Buhari's support of open grazing is unconstitutional, as states have the right to ban any illegal action that may threaten public peace. Clark wants security agencies to prevent any attack in Delta State.
Impression given that if they said that Asaba and Agbo will be turned into another Kaduna, Katsina, Northeast, it means that they are aware of the happenings in the north, which is deliberate as the impression they've now given. As I said, enough is enough. We sat for 9 hours. I'm 94. Without moving from my seat, 9 hours, discussing the affairs of Nigeria, how to move Nigeria forward. And a group of people, irresponsible men, threatening us, and the president and his agents, particularly Joe Garuba and others, they kept quiet as if they don't know what is going on. But when IPOC makes statement, they will jump on it. We can no longer continue in a country where some people regard themselves as superior to the others. Nobody has a right to force the state government to make law. They're independent of themselves. The Bayelsa state government has passed one, and even then, these people have impunity. 2 weeks ago or a week ago, these herdsmen were parading in the streets of Yanagwa until the governor ordered them to be arrested. So the question of making their statement legal by passing an act is their own prerogative. It has nothing to do with it.
Meanwhile, the governors of Ondo, Delta, Cross River, Enugu, Benue, and Akwa Ibom states have criticized President Buhari for his comments on grazing routes across the country. Bayelsa State Governor Doye Diri is one of those raising his voice. He insists that there is no grazing routes in Bayelsa and the law criminalizing open grazing is still in force in the state. Ovieteme George reports.
A herd of cattle strays on the road and gets involved in an accident, leaving the driver seriously injured in Yenagoa. Such disturbing scenes are no more seen in the city with the signing of the Livestock Breeding, Rearing and Marketing Regulation Bill 2021 into law by Governor Doye Diri on the 10th of March. Barely 3 months after, the governor restates the ban on open grazing.
Traditionally, occupationally, culturally, a fishing people. The issue of cattle grazing routes is very strange to us in this part of Nigeria. And even when they started bringing cattle, they were bringing it for sale, not to come and graze.
Governor Diri makes an unequivocal statement on cattle grazing routes.
Maybe they have cattle grazing routes in the north, but here in Bayelsa, we do not have cattle grazing routes. Our people are hunters before now and fishermen. And so I do not believe that that applies to us. In the federation, each of the federating units will maintain their autonomy to a certain degree. And that's the beauty of a federal system of government. I don't want us to believe that we are running a unitary system of government, that everything is centralized, and that cattle grazing routes are here in Bayelsa State. 1,000 times no.
17 governors of the South had, on the 11th of May, taken a stand against open grazing in Nigeria. Ovietime George, Arise News.
Great report there by Ovietime George. Tundu, goodness me.
Well, I think it's important to state that the Secretary General of Mietiala, MACBAN, Usman Baba Ngezelma, has completely denied that that ban was issued by Mietiala and blames faceless individuals who are intent on causing mischief. I'm sure that will give some comfort to some people. However, in the same statement, he goes on to say that northern governors should restore grazing routes across the country. I'm laughing at the absurdity of that. Northern governors have no say in the South, where the southern governors have come together to ban open grazing, as is their right under the Land Use Act of this country. I just don't understand a government that champions archaic, anachronistic practices like open grazing, narrow gauges, what have you. We have moved on. We saw this awful report just now with those cows lying on the street. My heart even goes out to the cattle. The cattle should not be reared in this old-fashioned manner that the whole world has jettisoned. Why are we so wedded to what everybody has left behind?
Okay, a number of issues here. One, the controversy over open grazing. And I think we should take along some opinions. One, today in this day, Femi Falana SAN has drawn attention to the fact that the Grazing Reserves Act of 1964, which the president purportedly referred to in his interview with Arise News last week, is not a law of general application. And anybody can double check that. His argument is that this was a law that is restricted to the northern part, that is applicable only the northern part of the country. And that as at 1964, the southern part of the country, the eastern region, the Midwest, the western region, and also in the southeastern part, had ranches, and there were specific laws back in that. And he thinks that, you know, the outcome of all of that controversy over cattle colony, otherwise known as Ruga, or the successor to it, the livestock transformation plan that was announced in 2018, had made a point about ranching. And that the best thing for the president to do is to support the idea of ranching. Because states in the South, some states in the South, already even have ranches, and that is the way to go. And that is on all fours with the position of many Nigerians that the way to modernize, you know, the management of livestock with regard to cattle is to adopt the option of ranching, which is what is done in other parts of the world. Two, the second issue has to do with the governor of Delta State, Patrick Okowa, being the host of the May 11 meeting of the 17 governors of the southern part of Nigeria, the southern states of Nigeria, where it was resolved unanimously that the governors of the South, 17 of them, had banned open grazing. Now, it's on the basis of that a faceless group has now gone ahead, I think he did so, on Saturday, June 12th, pasted notices across Delta State, threatening the Delta State governor and threatening to attack government facilities and make life impossible for the people of Delta State. And also, he took ownership of a previous attack on the government secretariat of Delta State in Asaba. Now, it is in response to that, and which is the third point, that you now have Chief Edwin Clark, leader of the Pan-Niger Delta Forum, chairman also of the Southern and Middle Belt Leaders Forum, coming forth to call out President Muhammadu Buhari and northern leaders to say that he expects that by now, a faceless group that says it is advancing the cause of Madam Fodio, you know, had issued a statement more than 72 hours later. No northern leader had stepped forward to condemn that group. And he was saying specifically that President Buhari must speak up and condemn that group, because if it had been Nnamdi Kanu or any other person in the South, the government of Nigeria will have come forward to condemn such a move. That was not the only thing that the elder statesman, Chief Edwin Clark, talked about. He also talked about the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice and accused him of being unprofessional in the kind of advice that he offers to the President of Nigeria. And that was why the President could, in the interview again with Arise TV last week, express an open support for grazing routes that the Attorney General should have reminded the President, should have given him appropriate advice. This being a major topical issue about the fact that, there is no existing gazette that is of general application in Nigeria. However, he made it clear also that nobody has a monopoly of madness. If some Uthman Danfodio jihadists are threatening to attack the people of Niger Delta, he and his people will also stand up to it. And it is in that regard, I guess, that the Pan-Niger Delta Forum has said, well, if anybody attacks anywhere in Delta State or anywhere in the South, they will meet fire with fire. And the movement for the emancipation of Niger Delta has also said it will declare what it calls Dragon War. And that it will, for every Niger Delta person that is killed, 10 Fulanis will be killed. And that it will be mayhem. That every oil facility owned by any northerner in Delta State would be attacked. And that the attack will not be restricted to the Niger Delta. Okay, what are our conclusions, our deductions from this? Look, we've been saying it on this program. We need dialogue. Yes. We need engagement. Yes. We need a national conference of the ethnic nationalities for people to go to the table and discuss whatever it is that is ailing them. The situation in which we have found ourselves now is a situation where people are negotiating within Nigeria with violent rhetoric. And I think it is frightening. And those who say, that civil war is not a good prospect, I always argue, I don't think any country can survive 2 civil wars. If you know any country that has survived it, tell me. And I say, look, on the basis of that alone, we have a responsibility to keep this country together, to ensure peace and stability, to build a sense of trust, of ownership, of belonging. Yeah. And you can only do that through dialogue, not through a faceless group saying that they will attack Delta State, or some other groups coming forward to say they will declare Dragon War against Fulanis in Nigeria. That is not the way to go. Nobody should fold their arms. Those who have the responsibility should not allow it to happen. However, the Delta Police Command has spoken up. They claim that the group is non-existent, that those who pasted those posters are miscreants. Now, the Nigeria police is always quick to jump to conclusions out of absolute laziness, in my view. If anything happens within 24 hours, they are already expressing an opinion. At what point did they do a proper investigation? Is the Delta State Police Command, has it done a thorough work? So it should not, on the basis of the lazy statement that command has issued, go and fold his arms. The threat should be taken seriously, and the security agencies should work in tandem to make sure that threat is not carried out, because the implication of it is that Nigeria sits on a keg of gunpowder.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abati. And real quickly, there is nothing, and there'll never be anything civil about a war. The killing of children, loss of humanity, loss of life, it's not a civil act. So I don't know where we got the word a civil war from. Nothing will ever be civil about a war, and we shouldn't even talk about that. And for the faceless group that quoted Uthman Danfodio, let me now quote Uthman Danfodio for you by saying, conscience is an open wound, and it's the truth that can heal it. If you have conscience, you will not do what you're doing. You will not inflame the polity in this country. You will not. And we need to come together and make this country work. All of us. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Rotus, Michael, Adesua, Aaron to give us updates on Africa, global business, COVID-19, sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rotus Adiri is here to give us an African business update. Over to you, Rotus.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Doctor, and good morning, Rufai. So we have an inflation preview today, and it's remarkable that Doctor just mentioned Dragon War, because there's another dragon that Nigeria is facing, which is a three-headed economic dragon. We're facing one of those dragons at about 8:30, about 12 minutes from now. The Bureau of Statistics should be releasing inflation figures. Now, you can interpret your own three-headed dragon for Nigeria. You could say it's power, corruption, tribalism. You could say it's stagflation, tepid economic growth, rising unemployment, rising inflation. I think, though, it's insecurity, inflation, and unemployment. But one of those dragons is what we're going to be facing in about 12 minutes when the Bureau of Statistics releases those figures. By the way, Yemi Kale usually tweets when we will expect these figures, but of course, due to the Twitter ban, we're just going by the calendar, so we're expecting those inflation figures to come out. If you look at April, if we pull up those April figures, remember we saw the deceleration of 5 basis points, 18.12% in April, headline inflation, food inflation 22.72%, and then core inflation 12.74%. So what are we expecting with respect to what we should see for the month of May? I mean, let's recap. Look at the FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. They released their Global Food Price Index in May, which showed the biggest jump in about 12-13 years. The Global Food Price Index from the FAO increased by almost 40%. Oils, cereals, and maize, so on and so forth, those are some of the things they targeted. And the FAO said that poor countries like Nigeria will be on the receiving end on these high food prices because they squeeze disposable income for the average citizen who is just barely getting by with all the other pressures that their pockets are facing. So that was one clue from the FAO as to what to look out for. We also we talked about the onion pressure. The organization, the Onion Producers and Marketers Association of Nigeria, where they threatened that they will cut off supply of onions to the southern part of the nation by southeast and parts of the southwest because of these insecurity issues. They lost about 2 billion naira worth of onions to a fire. That was another separate issue. But insecurity, again, one of those two dragons, is one of the reasons why the organization of onion producers and marketers said that they will cut off supply. So that's pressure there on onions. And by the way, I think a bag of onions now is up 46% to 22,000 naira from 15,000 naira. That's a large bag. The medium and smaller baskets also increased as well. Bread. Back also in May, the Association of Master Bakers and Caterers said that they would be increasing bread prices about 30% because of the increased cost of raw materials. So, you know, you put all this together, and what do we expect? Possibly could see inflation rise again. However, I should point out that when the Association of Master Bakers and Caterers made that announcement for bread, that was at the tail end of May. So that was May 28th, May 27th. Also, the onion threats of supply, that was early this month. That was early June. So, I mean, that being said, we might surprisingly still see a deceleration for headline inflation, but it's still going to remain elevated. I mean, I don't know. I'm still thinking I will remain at the 18% level. Nigeria is still going to be facing high inflation levels. We know what that means as far as disposable income for the average Nigerian, as far as the real rates of return on investments, where you have to subtract whatever interest rate you're getting on bonds, treasury bills, your savings accounts, subtract inflation for that, you get a negative figure. So from disposable income pressure to real rates of return being negative, to what it means for, you know, more people falling into poverty, we're expecting a high inflation, still a double-digit inflation figure. If I had to guess, I'd still say what 18.12%. Maybe we still remain at about 18.05 or so. That's where we see things. We'll get those figures now in about 8 minutes, hopefully, from the Bureau of Statistics.
Okay, Rotus. I mean, great point you made, and we should look at the economy critically because there was a report that came out of I think it was Bloomberg that talked about the cratering Nigerian economy, how it can pull the rest of Africa down. Those reports are scary, and pretty much the parameters you've talked about, you know, high unemployment rate, Phillips curve pretty much applies in this economy. Definitely there will be low wages because there's increase in unemployment rates and the likes. The bond market, not any better. Interest rates, the FDI, low. We score low on all the parameters. You know, we're not bringing people out of poverty. WorldPovertyClock.io says we're supposed to bring 0.3 people out of poverty per minute, you know, to be able to fight poverty. But we're putting 4.2 people in poverty every minute in this country. So all of this is just indicative that something has to be done. You know, we need to fight this dragon that has woken up. I mean, Harry Potter buffs like me will always say, never wake up a sleeping dragon. We've woken up this sleeping dragon of economic impasse in our country, and we need to put those dragons to sleep again.
Well, I don't even know why we're not really fully exploiting the low-hanging fruits that are right there, like reducing the size of government. That is a no-brainer, and yet I don't see much being done in that regard to actually help block some of the leakages. You're completely right about the food prices, which are their highest in 15 years, and it goes back to the president's speech about lifting 10.5 million Nigerians out of poverty. Where? Whom? Because everybody's paying an arm and a leg for basics like eggs. Eggs are now like some kind of caviar, some kind of delicacy. It's actually really worrying, and I'm looking forward to seeing the figures so we know exactly what we're dealing with here.
Well, Rotus, I mean, we're not just dealing with a three-headed dragon. I think this dragon we're dealing with is hydra-headed. And if I go by the number of variables that you listed, and the wings are larger than usual in terms of the effect. However, I see that you are optimistic about, the inflation figures not exceeding 18%. What is that optimism based on? Because other analysts are saying that the deceleration that we witnessed in April is not really something that is sustainable. But I like your optimism, but what is it based on? Just sheer patriotism? Although maybe we shouldn't engage in guesswork, since by 8:30, the National Bureau of Statistics would, come forward with the figures. But the reality, of course, is that life is not any better for the average Nigerian, either in terms of the price of commodities or in terms of the cost of food or in terms of the other variables that we'll be considering. But you're optimistic. Why?
Well, no, Doctor, it's still high. You're still at 18%. All I'm saying is that we might not see a jump to 19%. It's still, the average Nigerian is still struggling. Nobody wants high double-digit inflation. The central bank's target is 9%. So this is double what the target is. So it's not a good situation. I'm just saying I don't think we should see it accelerate further, but I could be wrong. So let's see what the numbers say.
Well, I hope you're right. Thank you, Rotus.
Thank you, Rotus. Yes. So what's next?
Well, Michael Wilson is next for more business updates from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. We're looking forward to the big event tomorrow, which is the FOMC meeting, and all the things that you've been talking about inflation, but how the US economy is affected by all that and rising prices and so on. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ, record highs yesterday. Dow Jones is lagging a bit. We'll get US retail sales and PPI figures later today before the main event. So therefore, what we're looking at basically as far as the Asian markets are concerned, China and Hong Kong under pressure. Two factors, interesting factors here. Number one, the Bank of China withdrew a lot of the money supply. They've withdrawn some liquidity from the market. And secondly, every major news outlet is running a story about problems with a French-designed nuclear reactor, which is located west of I'm looking at this now, the Pearl River Delta. That's 140 kilometers from Hong Kong. Now, I'm not going to add to rumors about that, but the markets are watching it very, very closely. So therefore, markets actually quite mixed today. As I was saying, futures, as far as the United States are concerned, looking slightly healthy. Nikkei up by 1%. Speculation that the Bank of Japan will announce some more pandemic support on Friday this week. That's keeping that higher. But China actually not doing that well this morning, but nothing drastic. Now, to add once again to your point about inflation, here's one for you. China, calling it the China shipping crisis. Businesses and consumers are basing themselves for another shipping crisis. A virus outbreak in southern China, causing huge disruptions in Shenzhen and Guangzhou. These are huge industrial and also export-based business centers, as you know. Look at this. Waiting times for vessels to go into the Yantian International Container Terminal in Shenzhen have gone up from half a day to 16 days. Now, we add to that, don't we, the fact that we're still waiting for even the Suez Canal. I know the blockage was finished months ago, well, weeks ago, but there's still an ongoing problem about container costs and shipping costs and so on as a result of that. So that's just adding to that. So as I said to US Day ahead. Manufacturing PPI, core PPI retail sales in the United States. What are we going to see? I don't think much will happen actually before we see the FOMC meeting tomorrow. JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan saying that he's worried about inflation, effectively stockpiling cash basically, not buying anything at the moment, just seeing how the FOMC, I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, but certainly over the next few months, this has got to be a consideration for them, as we've often noted. Doctor and I yesterday talked a bit about the G7 and the Belt and Road Initiative in China and what the Group of Seven is doing to counteract that. They're not going to stop it. That is the Belt and Road Initiative is too entrenched into the world economy to do that. But I think what G7 is doing is just reminding countries that there is another alternative if necessary. They do see that the Belt and Road Initiative is the Chinese president's signature on foreign policy. He's absolutely devoted to do that, to increase the country's global influence. The Bitcoin rally continues. We had that Elon Musk tweet yesterday. Now we've got a major investor saying that Goldman Sachs will be offering Ether futures and options. Hedge funds will have 7% of cryptocurrencies within 5 years. The markets are therefore thinking that the Bitcoin's targeting about $42,000 sooner rather than later. Let's come over to Europe, and the EU and the US are poised, I'm understanding from the FT this morning, to be coming to some sort of accommodation about the Airbus-Boeing 17 years this trade dispute has been going on at the moment. It's all about government subsidies. If you remember, the US imposed new tariffs not that long ago, $7.5 billion on EU exports in retaliation for EU tariffs, which roughly came to the same thing. The World Trade Organization will adjudicate on this. We may hear something about this today. Something we'll also hear about today is the UK-Australia trade deal, which apparently has been agreed. Now, there's a lot of conflict with farmers here, but there will be all sorts of deals being done on the sidelines to this. As I say, we expect some kind of announcement today. This is crucial for the UK, as well as its conflict with its own farmers and so on. But this has got to push us closer to becoming members of the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, the CPTPP. It's rather snappily named. Not really, of course, but it's very, very important. UK, now we're going to another 4-week lockdown here. There are dates being bandied around about this, when this may be lifted, maybe the middle of July, but I'm not sure about that really. I think things are too. There's this third, maybe a fourth infection coming in. Who knows? The jobs market is showing signs of recovery. According to figures out this morning, unemployment standing at 4.7%. But I would counter that by saying that once this is very much a developing kind of story, and the jobs market is certainly not doing well at all, given the pandemic and so on. Oil prices are continuing to edge higher, and gold is vulnerable to a deeper correction. It's fallen almost $30 an ounce overnight to 1844. It's quite a big night, actually, quite a big deal. That's the global.
Well, Michael, West lamb, Scottish smoked salmon, washed down with Australian wine yesterday. And the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and Prime Minister Robinson of Australia managed to work out a trade deal. But there are concerns about that trade deal, particularly from the agricultural industry in the UK, fears that would there be safeguards to make sure that the UK does not become a dumping ground for Australian meat, even if it's just about the volume of trade with meat. It's just about 0.15%. And how significant is this to Australia? Australia having issues with Beijing and now finding a new market, tariff-free market, to bring its products to the United Kingdom. I would like your comment on that. And then secondly, June 21 is supposed to be Freedom Day for people in the United Kingdom. But now we've been told that in England, there will be an extension of the restrictions to 19th July. The situation is different in Scotland, that is going to adopt zero level restrictions by the 28th. It's different in Wales. It's also different in Ireland. Now, But the hospitality industry, all these people in charge of weddings, in charge of theater, they're saying that they're going to lose a lot. And they are calling on the government to provide financial support. What do you think of that? The Chancellor is saying, well, the follow scheme is not going to be revised to accommodate this extension. But they're saying the hospitality industry people, nighttime entertainment people, they're saying they're going to lose a lot. What's your opinion in that regard?
As far as hospitalities are concerned, of course they're going to use a lot if clubs are not going to be open. As I understand it, the Prime Minister's already said there will not be any financial support for things in this sector. And I would look at July the 19th. Well, it may or may not happen. Who knows? I couldn't possibly predict that because these dates have been pushed forward. You either go on data or dates. I would have thought data's the kind of thing. I would add to this, though, that we're never, ever going to live, and we never have lived, in a risk-free environment. There may be snowflakes around who imagine that the world is a wonderful place, and once we get rid of a pandemic, then everything's rosy. It is not. There is still a load of disease around in the world, as you well know, certainly in Africa and so on, tuberculosis, smallpox. Still these huge killers are still around, as is flu in Europe, not to mention COVID-19. So what we are going to have to come to a stage is, and this is very, very difficult for politicians to decide on, and I've said this for months now, how do you actually say as a politician, you know what, you are going to have to take some risks on board, we are going to open things up. There are more and more cries for opening things up and saying, actually, let's get the vaccinations going. I think that's the key to it. Once the vaccinations come towards a large proportion of the younger generation, which incidentally, young generation does not suffer from COVID-19 if they catch it in the same way that the elder generation does, you've got to take all these things into account. So I think that, as I understand it, there'll be no further financial support for leisure industries, and they are adapting hugely. Of course, they will lose a lot, and we're going to hear more and more debate about this. I think what we'll see in this country is people actually willing, as I saw yesterday on various news broadcasts, people saying, I'd willingly go to prison for this. Actually, I really would. I'm fed up with being lectured to. No, you laugh about it. But people are actually saying, I'm very happy to do that. And Andrew Lloyd Webber, for example, who is a theatrical impresario, has joined that queue of people saying it's about time that we said, all right, we've got risk, we need to handle it, let's open up leisure industries. Number one. Number two, Australia, meat, and all the rest of it. Yeah, I'm sure that the farmers in this country are complaining. Farmers always do complain. It's very, very expensive. There's a limited amount of space. They have been caught that they're not really listened to in the same way. The farming lobby is not as important as it is in Europe, and it's certainly not as important as it is in Australia. However, if they can be persuaded to take a long-term view, which is that if this increases our opportunity to join the CPTPP, the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, that mouthful will certainly be a mouthful for the kind of mouths that our farmers want to feed. And that would be opening future markets around the rest of the world. So that's the long-term view. That's what has to be thought of. I'm certain the Australians are rejoicing in this, but the world's a much bigger place than that. As you quite rightly noted, they've got their own problems with their export markets, particularly China, which is their biggest one. They'll be seeing this as an opportunity, but it'll be very, very small. There's a lot of negotiation to take place over this. And just because we might get an announcement later this morning about this to confirm that a deal, in inverted commas, has been done, the devil, of course, is in the detail.
Definitely the detail, like they say. Great one. I still want to harp a little bit on the trade, conversations going on, between United Kingdom and most of its partners. I saw former Prime Minister of Australia, Prime Minister Abbott, the other day on GB News, talking about advising Britain and pushing Britain's strength forwards to other trading partners. Will Abbott give any valuable advice that will crack it as regards trade for Britain? And I just want to know more about that. Former Australian PM leading Britain's trade delegation and trade advisory.
I can only speak for what I've actually already said about this, that if we are broadening horizons about trade, I can't speak for Australia because I know that they've got their own political political push as far as this is concerned. They've done very well out of the coronavirus pandemic, but they are a long way from anywhere. Australia and New Zealand, it takes a long time to get there. They are huge countries, but they are desperately isolated. And Australia is looking towards China to increase its export markets. It is its biggest export partner. I don't know how this will affect it. As far as the UK is concerned, we're reaching out gingerly, aren't we, to all sorts of nations to try to get trade going. We have a big partner just across the channel, but we're trying to become international about this. And I feel as though if there are trade talks going on, I think the Australia deal, if it were to happen, will be absolutely crucial to this much larger prize of joining the CPTPP, which also will act as a powerful counter to Chinese export ambitions, which are massive, as you well know.
Right. I know Rishi Sunak has made himself quite clear on not extending the furlough, but what are your thoughts on the end of the moratorium on rent for commercial properties? How exactly are the tenants supposed to cough up the rent? People who have been closed since March 2020 in the hospitality industry. What are your thoughts on that particular problem, and the possible slide into bankruptcy for a lot of businesses?
I think that the bankruptcy is inevitable for many businesses and so on. I think that what happens with the Chancellor, this particular Chancellor, who's got his firm eyes on being Prime Minister, there's no question about that, is he will be taking a day-to-day look at those kind of things. There may well be a further moratorium on business rents and so on. I mean, why not? Why wouldn't you do it? If you're furloughing people, paying people to stay off work, why not help businesses so that they will rapidly ascend, which they will. I mean, all indications are, in our kind of economy, that as soon as the doors open to business. They just do. People are hugely wanting to get out, wanting to socialise, wanting to meet in places. And the service industry, restaurants and the rest of it, are extremely big, as you know, in this country. We're well known for it. I think that what he will do is, if I were him, what I'd be doing is, and I can't speak for him, of course, but what I'd be doing is I would be extending that moratorium so that it does take into account. But it can't go on forever. As I say, somebody somewhere along the line is going to have to take a calculated risk and say, you know what, life's risky. It is. Crossing the road's risky. Driving a car's risky. Coming to work's risky. Taking a job's risky. Everything's about risk. It's a question of how you actually factor it in.
Well, quickly, Michael, before we go, what should we expect from the Federal Reserve's policy meeting tomorrow? Bond reductions or a hike in interest rates? We have just less than a minute.
You're talking about the FOMC?
FOMC, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. No, there won't be any alteration in interest rates. What we're looking for is their view of where they feel it will be all in the wording. It's what's their view on inflation and what's their view on continuing to support the pandemic support measures. Will there be a slight taper of bond buying back? Those are the kind of clues that we'll be searching for what the FOMC says. No, nothing firm like interest rates. It's just all in the shading of the language. That's what we'll be looking for.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Michael, for your time. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adeso Omoro is here. She does an excellent job every time, I should say.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I come bearing some good news today as the number of coronavirus cases has dropped for the past 7 weeks. Now, the head of the WHO, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, says it's the longest such period of decline since the pandemic began. He welcomes the drop, but said the number of COVID-19 deaths were not falling equally quickly, and the vastly unequal access to coronavirus vaccines was threatening further progress. This comes as the U.S. nears another grim milestone of 600,000 deaths. At the moment, according to the Johns Hopkins tally on your TV screens, 176.2 million people have now been infected with the coronavirus. Looking at death tolls, there has now been over 3.8 million deaths. And of course, so far, 2.3 billion doses of vaccines have been administered worldwide. Over here in Nigeria, 12 new infections were recorded in Lagos and Kwara states. No deaths recorded in the last 24 hours in the country. And vaccination against COVID-19 continues across Nigeria. An additional 22,492 people were inoculated in the last 24 hours, according to the latest data by the NPHCDA, bringing the total for the second dose exercise to 662,464 individuals. Elsewhere, In a major setback for South Africa's coronavirus vaccine rollout, the country is to discard 2 million Johnson & Johnson doses because of a potential contamination of ingredients traced back to the U.S. The U.S. FDA on Friday ruled that ingredients for the country's doses may have been contaminated during production in a plant in Baltimore, and that's coming from President Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, the deal with South Africa is for Emergent Pharmaceuticals to produce the vaccines in the U.S., but Aspen Pharmaceuticals in South Africa has a contract to fill and package the doses in Port Elizabeth, but now they have to discard those 2 million doses of the J&J. Elsewhere, I know you talked about the UK easing restrictions and Freedom Day not to be until July. Well, Prime Minister Boris Johnson is saying there's good reasons for this because of the Delta variant and, of course, because of the vaccination rates in the young people who says they're the ones who mix the most. The steepest increases are seen in young people and children who are yet to be vaccinated, and statistically, they are less likely to become seriously ill, but they can transmitted very easily. So the new date will now be July 19. Moving on, parts of India have eased coronavirus restrictions, including the capital, after new infections dropped to their lowest levels in more than 2 months. There were just a little over 70,000 infections on Monday, compared to May, when we're talking about India recording over 400,000 infections daily. But the deaths in India from coronavirus are still high. Authorities allowed all shops and malls to open as the number of new infections dropped, of course, and tourist sites like the Taj Mahal, which you saw moments ago, as well as the Red Fort, are also set to begin allowing visitors back in from this week.
Well, Adesua, first about the reduction in figures, in the rates of infection. The story coming out of India is encouraging. In India, since the beginning of this month, there have been attempts to ease restrictions in many parts of the country, particularly Delhi, Tamil Nadu, Bangalore, in Karnataka state, in Maharashtra, and in Gujarat. So, because the infection rate in April, which was as high as about 400,000 per day, has gone down to just about 7,000. But I think what is important in India is the need to move on with great caution.
Yes.
And that is why in a place like Delhi and in other places, the easing of the restriction is faced. So because again, sometimes last week, I think, the death rate suddenly went up, but it then came down again to just about 3,000 per day. But the whole world was worried about India that rolled out the largest immunization program. And again, the rate of immunization in India is still very low, just about 12% out of its 950 million adult population. So just to put the matter the way it is. In South Africa, yes, it's a major setback that they've had to destroy about 2 million vaccine doses because of the contaminated ingredients that came from the United States. But that facility, the Aspen Pharmaceutical Facility in South Africa, has the capacity to produce up to about 200 million vaccine doses annually. And what we're told is that today again, they will continue with the process of production. And what we see in the South African example, which South Africa incidentally has the highest rate of infection in Africa, about 1.7 million people infection rate, which is more than 30-40% of the total in the whole of Africa. But we've seen South Africa being very proactive and ready to reinvent itself in the face of challenges. Initially, it was the AstraZeneca vaccine that was found not to be responsive, effective enough to the South African variant, and quickly, they moved on to the Johnson & Johnson. And then they engaged in this sharing, partnership with the United States for the manufacturing of the J&J. And now they have this challenge again, they've moved on again. I think there are lessons to be learned from the responsiveness of the South African government. They've also procured millions of doses, over 3 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine, because the the vaccination rate in South Africa is just a little over 1% of its 60 million population. But we see that government moving and making efforts. Here in Nigeria, I would like to hear similar stories about Nigeria. You know, manufacturing vaccines, making, procuring more vaccines so that the vaccination process in Nigeria can go beyond 1%, and we'll be able to achieve herd immunity. But we're not there yet.
Yes.
Definitely we're not there yet, and great insights there you shared that, Dr. Abati. Real quickly, I want to also talk about Novavax.
Yes.
And the good news coming out of Novavax, the Maryland-based company in America, their third phase trial, 90.6% efficacy rate for the vaccine. I mean, we can add one more, and it's good against all the variants. It will work well against, many other variants, the Delta, the Beta, and the likes. I mean, some good news coming out of America. And this is something we should all look at critically. So we'll have more vaccines, multiple vaccines to the vaccine race. But how can we get those vaccines back to countries that are really needed? I mean, America has done and dusted with Moderna. Moderna's churned out its own vaccine. Novavax is coming to the market. We've got Pfizer, we've got AstraZeneca, we've got the one from China, Sinovac. And once you have all of those vaccines and the one made out of India, then we should be able to add more to it so that the world can fully recover and go back to pre-pandemic levels in terms of economic growth, maybe first quarter, second quarter 2022 or 2023. I mean, we should be done with this already because it stifled people's lives. Look at how people are reacting in Britain because Freedom Day was pushed backwards. People are irate. You needed to see the strong editorials being put out on GB News yesterday against the Prime Minister saying that, we need to take the bull by the horn. Other countries are opening up and we need to open up our economy. We can't delay this for another 1 month because the government is suffering. It's paying out furlough. It's paying out money it doesn't have. It's borrowing money to pay furlough. And that's the effect of coronavirus. But amidst all of this, another cherry news, Novavax, probably, it should get emergency authorization. Probably we should start using it anytime soon, and we can add more vaccines to the fray.
I just can't believe the nightmare we find ourselves in and we're still in. I just have to have this moment. What are we even talking about? How did this happen? But I want to highlight a really worrying situation that's emerged in Uganda. And they are in their third wave. Cases have spiked by 2,800%. They've run out of oxygen, run out of hospital beds, run out of vaccines. That situation is dire. And while, yes, I do support the thinking that, the UK is being really ginger about this COVID-19 situation. They've gone really far with their vaccine rollout and they just need to reopen. I also understand what the politicians are worried about. Look at what is happening in Uganda. I don't even know what to say about where we are. But I want your take specifically. Was Boris Johnson right in postponing Freedom Day to the 19th of July? That's if at all it even happens on the 19th of July.
Well, Tundu, sometimes I don't think it's a question about being right or wrong. When it comes to coronavirus infections or any other viral outbreaks, sometimes all you need to do is to break the chain of infection. And so stopping people from mixing, and especially the young people who are the ones who mix a lot, who are not yet vaccinated, then it begins to make sense. And I dare say, I guess the Prime Minister was right in trying to break the chain of infection. Starting today, those 18 and above, under 25s, will start to get their vaccines in the UK. For another 2 weeks, they are hoping that they should have covered a lot of them. And by July 19, they must have covered majority, and so they can open. So, yes, we need to break the chain of infection sometimes, and that's why lockdowns come into place during this pandemic. It works. We've seen it in India. That's what they've done in those cities.
In England, the big issue is the fact that about 60% of currently reported infections are due to the Delta variant. And it's been noted by the scientists that the Alpha variant, the one associated with Kent, is not as, as fast in terms of spread as the Delta variant. And this extension based on lessons learned previously, is to allow the UK, England particularly, to take a look at this variant and to immunize people more, increase the rate of immunization, and bring down the rates of hospitalization. But the Prime Minister also made the point that this may not be more than 1 month in terms of extension, and that in fact it could be shorter. So I see the learning curve working to the advantage of England. However, the situation is different in Scotland and also in Wales, where the easing of restrictions will take place before June 28th.
Remember that if you do not move, the virus doesn't move. It's as simple as that. So they need to break the chain of infection while vaccination is ongoing. It's simple.
Thank you so much, Adesu. A great point, Tundu, you made about Uganda. Also, Zambia is having a resurgence, which is sad. We pray for the speedy recovery of former president and founder of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, is in the hospital. He's 97. We pray he makes it out well. Thank you so much, Adesu.